Okay. In the check for understanding, we're going to break this down. So how would you solve the first one? I want to get x, but x squared is equal to negative 16. What should we do?
Use imaginary numbers, so it can be negative.
Yep, before that, we're just going to square root both sides. And we get x is the square root of negative 16. And you're right, we're going to have to use imaginary numbers. And I'm going to break this down. 16, or negative 16, that can be written as negative 1 times 16. I'm going to break this up. Because I know the square root of 16 is 4 and negative 4. And we just discovered that the square root of negative 1 is I. So I'm breaking up my roots. I'm separating the negative from the number. Are we okay with that step? Now I'm going to replace, this is going to turn to I. This turns into positive 4 and minus 4. So in the end, my answer is going to be positive 4 or minus 4, I. I could write out both answers. I could say this is 4I and negative 4I. There's two ways you could write that. You could write it with a plus or minus, or you could write them out individually. Let's try it with B. I'm going to square root. When I square root negative 12, I have to break it down. What are some factors of 12 that have a perfect square? Because you could do 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Which factor pair has a nice square root? You could do 1 and 12, you could do 2 and 6, you could do 3 and 4. Which one of these numbers you can actually take a square root of? 4. So I'm going to use that factor pair. I'm going to break the negative away from it. The square root of 3 times the square root of 4. And each of these things is going to break down. This turns into an I. The square root of 3 is irrational. So I'm going to leave it as the square root of 3. The square root of 4 is 2, or negative 2. So in the end, we get plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3, I. And I'm going to leave the square root of 3, or else it just becomes a decimal mess. It's an irrational number. It is a lot. It is crazy. C. Let's move on to C. Let's move on to D. C and D is what you're going to see on your test. So what should we do first? We're going to solve by undoing. What should we do first algebraically? Minus 15 from both sides. Negative 35. Subtract 15 more. What are we going to get? Should we get negative 50? How do we continue solving? Divide by 2. I'm getting x squared equals negative 25. What's the next step? We're going to square root. So I can break this down. I get negative 1 times the square root of 25. Is it 5 what? Good. It's 5i. It's negative 5i. That turns into I. This turns into plus or minus 5. So plus or minus 5i. Try this last one with your group. You're solving by undoing. We all had the correct first step. We minus 5 from both sides. Then we're going to square root next. Remember, a square and a square root cancel out, so I'm left with x minus 3. Part A. Remember, this is negative 1 times 16. This turns into I. This turns into plus or minus 4. So this is plus or minus 4i. That's okay. We can just add 3 to both sides. Our answer is complex. It has a real part and it has an imaginary part. That's it. We're just getting x alone. Questions? It's okay. We're going to have questions. Our homework is 1 through 5. We are going to skip 1C for right now. We're going to skip 1C.
Okay, let's go on, stop there.